Communications with citizens who registered to speak. We have Brett Rutherford.
I'm here to speak on behalf of the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Bexar County for the current contract negotiations. I'd first like to address and urge the Commissioners Court to fund the current proposal by the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Bexar County, which is a joint or a mixed 18-15% increase for the Deputy
You want to
Sheriff.
wait just a second? Wait till they move out because we can't hear you very well. Okay.
Again, as I was saying, I'm representing the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Bexar County. I am a detention sergeant, and I'm here to first off urge you to fund the current proposal by the Deputy Sheriff's Association of Bexar County for the wage and earnings, which is a mixture of an 18 and 15% increase. As that's been presented to the membership through various people, it has support, and I think this is a move in the right direction for not only the Sheriff's Department, but for Bexar County. It will help increase our base pay to where we can attract and retain the best persons for the job. To allow the Sheriff's Department to attract and retain the best persons for the job. Right now, we've been in a crisis in the detention center over the last several years with mandatory overtime, and that is the second and extremely important part of the contract that's coming up for negotiations. And I would urge funding on that is the increase in time, the increase in money for overtime pay. Overtime pay has gone up and down over the last several years. Currently, the contract only calls for $250,000 to be put into for the sheriff to utilize to pay for overtime. With the current hours that we've used so far, based on a first-year officer's salary alone, we spent roughly $130,000 for the first 3 weeks of the fiscal year. So we can see that the $250,000 is woefully inadequate. If we look over the past several years, the sheriff has had to come to Commissioners Court multiple times. We spent just, I believe it was $512,000 for 2.5 months of last year just to fund overtime. The problem with not funding overtime and giving compensatory time is, first, we're kicking the can down the road. Eventually, that has to be paid to the officers. It's money, it's time that they've worked that does have to be paid. And what happens is when an officer leaves eventually, we're paying them out at a higher rate than we would if we would have just paid them at the time. As their salaries increase, as they move up the step plan, we're actually paying more money than if we would just fund it and pay them at the exact time that they do work. Two, it costs us more money because people leave because they're not getting paid. After they've taken compensatory time, when they first start out as officers, within their first year, most of the time they leave simply because they're going, I'm working a lot of hours and I'm not getting paid. And so what happens is we end up paying them again still, but we pay them out of the compensatory budget instead of paying them out of an allotted budget of overtime. What we're doing then is we're having to rehire and retrain again, and that's costing the county again more money. So I would urge that the county directs that the negotiating team for the county again urge for the funding for the current proposal for the 15 and 18% increase in pay, which will help us attract and retain people, and that the county, again, increase the amount within the contract. The proposal by the Deputy Sheriff's Association at the last meeting was $750,000. That's a 3-time increase, but it's still less than on average what we spend. But at least it would give the sheriff more leeway to be able to pay that overtime for a longer period of time so that eventually that they can get control on the overtime if we can retain the people.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll
Thank you.
get on it. Don Tiarena?
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners, all deputies in attendance, and everyone following online. My name is Don Tijerina. The lack of high morale affects this county's public safety. Despite numerous requests to resolve, due to the county's continued unwillingness to be fair towards Sheriff's Office lieutenants and captains, a class action charge is being prepared to file with the National Labor Relations Board against the county and the Sheriff's Office over the county's policy classifying lieutenants and captains as FLSA exempt. There is an easy solution that would avoid a prolonged legal dispute and court costs. Change the county policy and reclassify Sheriff's Office lieutenants and captains as FLSA non-exempt, as the case today with SAPD and DPS. The issue of lack of comparable base salaries between deputies, where deputies are 25 to 35% behind today as compared to SAPD and DPS, will transcend the current election cycle, with no new CBA for deputies. Capital projects are being funded for the Sheriff's Office, but the human capital, the brave men and women of the Sheriff's Office who risk their lives every day in service to the community, still do not perceive the county understands the law enforcement side of the equation, as evidenced by the county's latest offer, an across-the-board salary increase of 15% over 4 years for law enforcement and detention. The county intends on paying detention tiered deputies 15%, and that's great. But for law enforcement tiered deputies, who today, right now, as I speak, are 25 to 30% behind in base salary as compared to SAPD and DPS, 15% over 4 years is not acceptable. Detention deputies understand that law enforcement deputies are further behind in base pay and support their request for a greater increase. Although a majority of patrol deputies, including myself, believe the union offer is too low, if the county were to increase its offer as requested by the union from the county's current 15% across the board to 18% for all law enforcement deputies and detention supervisors, which together are less than half of the Sheriff's Office bargaining unit, the actual dollar figure for the 3% difference would only add approximately $675,000 to the proposed collective bargaining agreement, less than the San Pedro Creek ART. WOAI reports they forecast an additional, possibly larger property tax hike at the 6 to 10% range for years to come. The county currently has, and will continue to have, the funding for base salary increases for deputies. Attempting to keep politics out of negotiations, it would make sense to have a 3-year instead of 4-year contract, if you can see your handout. Having a 4-year contract, negotiations would begin in 2020, with negotiations going through the primaries in March and continuing through the campaign season, with the contract expiring in September 30th of 2020, and if a new deal is not reached, into the general elections in 2020. Politically speaking, we would be in the same situation we are in today, with a 4-year contract regarding negotiations and the election cycle. With a 3-year contract, we would not. Commissioners, the buck stops here. Stop kicking the can down the road. This can is made up of the lives of our deputy sheriffs, this county's guardian warriors, who protected our community last night, who will be working on Veterans Day and Thanksgiving and Christmas. Please offer all deputies, not only detention officers, a fair and comparable base salary. Increase and offer law enforcement deputies comparable base salaries to the base salaries of SAPD and DPS. We are a team. We just have different jobs, and we all understand that. We are united together, detention and law enforcement, but there are different pay structures for each side, and we ask that you recognize that difference. Thank you. May God always bless our first responders and our veterans.
Well, thank you, Donna. Hopefully we'll get something done. Hopefully we'll keep moving together.
Judge, I just had a point of personal privilege, if I could. Sergeant, I'm the new kid on the block, and you're representing the association, and I'm not going to get into the negotiation specifics, but as a point of information for me, you've indicated the union is supportive of a bifurcated pay rate, and I think there is some very legitimate concerns about whether that can pass, considering the membership of the union. Is there anything you can tell us about past precedent, history, or your whip count in terms of whether a dual pay structure can actually pass the union membership?
Yes, we've had a bifurcated pay system for several years with the tier system. Detention already gets paid less than LE does on each and every section. As I've talked to membership at work, and I work in the detention center, and I've explained to them and talked to them about the increases, they are comfortable with a 15% increase because it actually does bring us up slightly above market value, which again, they understand that the difference between the two, and they have a vested interest also in the law enforcement side, seeing that larger increase because you have to start in the detention center and those that want to go to the law enforcement side. So as a career choice through the detention center, what happens is with the proposal that's currently, sergeants and above in the detention center actually will receive the 18%. So those officers that come into the detention center that move up in a career path, whether they decide to stay in detention or law enforcement, are going to receive that higher pay. The 15% is only at the starting ranks. That's only at the very beginning of someone's career. And so it does bring those two levels up actually slightly above market value. So there has been support from the membership that I've talked to so far, that they're comfortable with that, because eventually they will reach that point where they're receiving the higher pay of the 18%, either on the law enforcement side or as they move into a supervisory position within the detention center.
That's a real interesting observation. The bargaining unit is a tough bargaining unit when you got detention and you got law enforcement, a little different than the city, and it makes it difficult, but maybe that's possible.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.